Hi everyone, welcome to History Doodles. Today we're going to be talking about the famous English explorer Henry Hudson and his disappearance in 1611. Without further ado, let's get into it. This is The Last Voyage of Henry Hudson by John Collier, painted in 1881. Here we see the famous English explorer at the end of his line. His beard is long and gray, his eyes are strained and searching around the empty, frozen wasteland that he finds himself in. He's holding the hand of his nervous teenage son, and his crew is like laying and staring off, just completely apathetic and waiting for death beneath a fur blanket. How the hell did Henry Hudson get in such a pickle? Well, that's the question that John Collier wanted you to think about when he made this painting in the late 19th century. The expedition shown here happened almost 300 years before the painting was made, and it shows the last of 4 expeditions that Henry Hudson took before his disappearance in 1611. His situation here is so dire because he had been left for dead by his mutinous crew, who couldn't take his obsessive searching for the Northwest Passage any longer. This all started in 1607, when Henry Hudson, a married man in his 40s with 3 children, was hired by the Muscovy Company of England to find a new sailing route to Asia. This was an enormous opportunity because, at the time, England had to sail all the way around the southern tip of Africa to get to Asia and bring back spices and stuff, and that whole journey took the better part of a year. So the world's first large corporations and governments themselves funded expeditions to find a quicker way to move back and forth between Europe and Asia. Hudson got money for this purpose, but his first 2 expeditions were kind of a bust. And that left the English with little confidence that he was going to be able to find the Northwest Passage. So he had to turn to the other major naval trading power of the day, the Dutch. So he goes to Amsterdam and is able to convince investors that on his last expedition, he had made it past the Arctic Circle, and that up there it was so sunny that it actually became a hospitable climate with grass and wild animals running around. They actually bought this, and he got investment for a 3rd expedition, which set sail in 1609. When he arrived in North America this time, he was turned away by ice initially, but he had heard speculative stories about a river heading through North America to the Northwest Passage. So he sails along the east coast of present-day Canada and the United States, and he drops anchor at what is now called the Hudson River, which bears his name. Henry Hudson and his crew traveled up the river and were amazed by the fertile land and the abundance of resources. They contacted Native American tribes living in the area, and supposedly Hudson tried to give some of them alcohol so they would reveal the secret location of the Northwest Passage. That obviously didn't work, and eventually they came to a point in the river that it was too narrow around present-day Albany, and his men forced him to turn back and sail to Europe. Since he had not found the passage, Hudson couldn't show his face in Amsterdam. He didn't want to own up to the 3rd consecutive failure, so instead he sailed to Dartmouth, England. When he arrived there, he was actually arrested for working with the Dutch. Hudson was, however, able to get his findings out to the Dutch about the fertile land in present-day upstate New York, and it led to the Dutch establishing New Netherland, their colony where modern-day New York and New Jersey are. Their military outpost of New Amsterdam was in Manhattan, and it featured a large wall where modern-day Wall Street is. Anyways, Hudson managed to get out of legal trouble and find private financing for a 4th expedition, which would be his last. In June 1610, Hudson was able to navigate through what is now called the Hudson Strait, which goes around Labrador in Canada and opens up into Hudson Bay. Vibes were high on this discovery, and they sailed along the east coast of the bay, but inevitably winter came, and the men had to spend the winter on the frozen coast of James Bay. After a brutal winter, Hudson was set on exploring further into Hudson Bay, but his crew was just having none of it. Details are sparse here because most of the men from this expedition would not make it home to tell their side of the story. But apparently a quarrel broke out of what to do next, and a mutiny of 13 of the crew members happened. Once these crew members got control, they made the decision to cast away Hudson, his son, and 6 other men in an open boat, while the rest of the mutineers sailed back to Europe. What happened to Hudson and his son and the other men has been talked about ever since. In the 20th century, Dorothy Harley Eber collected oral history from the Inuit people who had a strikingly familiar story, which has led to some thoughts that it actually might have involved Hudson, where an old man with a long white beard, accompanied by a child, arrived in a wooden boat, and that these Inuits had never seen a white person before, so they brought him into their encampment and fed them. The story goes that the old man died shortly afterwards, but they kept the boy. It might seem ridiculous to rely on a story like that, but this kind of story has led to the discovery of 2 shipwrecks in the area. Finally, the Northwest Passage did in fact exist, but it was not navigable in the way that Hudson was hoping. It was first successfully navigated by Roald Amundsen between 1903 and 1906, and it required spending 3 winters on the ice and spending the warm seasons navigating through narrow straits. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, it would be awesome if you could like and subscribe. And I hope to see you next time. Bye.